They say with age comes wisdom, a certain comfort in your own skin, a sense of knowing how the world works. But let me tell you what they don't say. With age, you also become a bigger target. The world doesn't see wisdom, it sees a nest egg, a trusting nature, an opportunity. Did you know that seniors lose an estimated $3 billion a year to financial scams alone? $3 billion. And that number doesn't even touch the day-to-day deceptions. The contractor who inflates the bill, the caregiver who's not being entirely honest, even family members who might hide a difficult truth for your own good. The stakes get higher as we get older. Your ability to discern truth from a well-crafted lie is not just a party trick, it's a primary line of defense. For decades, my entire world revolved around one simple question. Is this person telling me the truth? In interrogation rooms, you don't have the luxury of a gut feeling. You need a system. Today, I'm going to give you a piece of that system, pulled directly from the work of researchers like Dr. Paul Ekman and the training manuals used by federal agents. We re-talking about micro-expressions, the involuntary flashes of emotion that leak out in less than 1/25th of a second. Your brain literally cannot stop them. They are the cracks in the liar's mask. Let's start with the basic science, and don't worry, I'll make it simple. Imagine you have two brains. Your animal brain, the limbic system, is ancient. It's responsible for raw, unfiltered emotion, fear, anger, joy, disgust. It reacts instantly without your permission. Then you have your thinking brain, the neocortex. This is the sophisticated, logical part that's responsible for language, planning, and, of course, lying. When you ask someone a direct, high-stakes question, "Did you take the money?" their animal brain reacts first with the true emotion, maybe a flash of fear or guilt. An instant later, the thinking brain kicks in and tries to plaster over it with a socially acceptable, deceptive response. Of course not. But for a fraction of a second, that real emotion leaked out onto their face. That's the micro-expression. It's the ghost of the truth. Federal agents who are trained to spot these cues see a significant increase in their ability to detect deception. It's not magic, it's biology. The body is fighting the mind, and if you know where to look, you can see the conflict play out in real time. Have you ever had a feeling that someone's smile didn't quite reach their eyes? That's you, on an intuitive level, picking up on this very disconnect. The question is, are you ready to move beyond intuition and start seeing it with purpose? Let's get practical. The first micro-expression is one of the most common and reliable indicators of withheld information. Lip compression. I'm talking about when a person suddenly and firmly presses their lips together into a thin, hard line. It can last for just a moment, but it's a dead giveaway. You ask a simple question, and you see that mouth tighten as if trying to physically block words from escaping. This isn't the same as a thoughtful purse of the lips, this is a tense, stressed clamp. It's the physical manifestation of the phrase, biting your tongue. The brain is screaming the truth, and the body is literally holding the door shut. I remember a case involving a teenager. Let's call him Ricky. His mother's favorite antique vase was smashed to pieces. She was convinced the cat did it. I sat down with Ricky, who was putting on a great performance of being sad for his mom. I asked him neutral questions first, about school, about his friends. His face was relaxed, his mouth was normal. This is called establishing a baseline. Then I asked, "Ricky, were you playing ball in the house before the vase broke?" Instantaneously, his lips vanished. It was a single, tight press. He then shook his head, a little too vigorously. That split-second compression told me everything I needed to know before he even answered. He was physically stopping himself from saying, "Yes." This isn't just for interrogation rooms. Think about asking your spouse if they remembered to pay the electric bill, or asking a mechanic if that $500 repair is really necessary. Ask the question, then watch. Don't listen to the words, first watch the mouth. The psychology here is beautifully simple. Lying creates internal conflict and stress. That stress has to go somewhere, and it often goes into tensing muscles. The mouth is the gateway for the lie, so it becomes a focal point of that tension. It's a subconscious effort to prevent the truth from slipping out. It says, "I have something to say, but I know I shouldn't." It's especially powerful when you see it in response to a specific question. A person who is generally tight-lipped is one thing, but a person whose mouth is relaxed until you touch on one particular subject? That's a bright red flag. Have you ever noticed yourself doing this? Maybe when your boss asks if a project is finished and you know it's not. Or when a friend asks if you like their questionable new haircut. Pay attention to your own body's reactions. You'll find it's a universal human response to holding something back. Now, before we go any further, I need to clear up a myth. This is one of the biggest mistakes amateurs make, something that's been drilled into us by bad television shows and pop psychology. It's the idea that a liar won't look you in the eye. Let me be blunt. That is absolute, unequivocal nonsense. In fact, in my experience, I found that practiced, confident liars will do the exact opposite. They will hold your gaze with unnerving intensity. They do this because they know you're looking for them to avert their eyes. They overcompensate. They're performing. It's a conscious, calculated act to appear sincere. I once interrogated a con man, a fellow named Silas who had charmed his way through the life savings of half a dozen retirees. He was as smooth as they come. For 2 hours he sat across from me, telling the most elaborate and outrageous lies, and he never broke eye contact once. He leaned in. He looked at me with what seemed like utter sincerity. But his sincerity was a weapon. His steady gaze was a performance. On the other side of that coin, who does tend to break eye contact? Nervous people, anxious people, people who are intimidated by authority, and, very often, innocent people who are terrified of being disbelieved. I've had more innocent witnesses break down in tears, unable to look at me, than I've had guilty ones avert their gaze. The stress of the situation, the fear of being wrongly accused, is overwhelming. They are not looking away because they're hiding a lie, they're looking away because they're drowning in the emotion of the moment. So, what does this mean for you? It means you throw that old rule out the window. Stop using eye contact as a primary indicator of truth. Instead, use it to establish a baseline. Does the person normally make a lot of eye contact? Or are they naturally shy? A change from their baseline is what's significant. If a normally confident person suddenly can't meet your eye when asked about a certain topic, that's noteworthy. If a shy, quiet person suddenly locks eyes with you with unusual intensity after a question, that's also noteworthy. But don't fall into the trap of thinking looking away equals lying. It's a rookie mistake, and it will lead you to accuse the innocent and trust the guilty. Have you ever misjudged someone because they seemed shifty or couldn't look you in the eye? Think back. Was it possible you were reading nerves instead of deception? Let's move on to the second micro-expression, and this one is about spotting a fake. I'm talking about asymmetrical expressions. A genuine, felt emotion engages the entire face symmetrically. Think of a real, joyous laugh. The eyes crinkle, the cheeks lift, and both sides of the mouth pull up in unison. The brain sends that emotional signal out, and it hits both sides of the face at the same time. But a manufactured emotion, a forced smile, a feigned look of surprise, a crocodile tear apology, is often lopsided. One side of the mouth might pull up higher than the other, or one eyebrow might lift while the other stays put. This happens because you are consciously trying to create the expression rather than unconsciously feeling it. Your brain's left and right hemispheres can get out of sync for just a moment, creating a distorted, uneven look. It's a subtle but powerful tell that the emotion is not genuine. It's a performance. Remember Silas, the con man I mentioned? He was a master of the charming, reassuring smile. It was his primary tool. He'd listen to his victims' financial worries, give them that big, warm smile, and promise to make it all better. But when we reviewed the tapes of him, we saw it. Every time he made his big promise, his smile was slightly crooked. The left side of his mouth would pull up just a fraction of a second before the right, and it never quite reached the same height. It wasn't a real smile of empathy, it was the mask he wore to get what he wanted. Here's a practical way to practice spotting this. Next time you see a public figure giving a televised apology, try this. Use your hand to cover one side of their face on the screen, then the other. Does the emotion look the same on both halves? With a genuine expression, both halves will mirror each other. With a fake one, you'll often find one side looks engaged while the other seems passive or even contradictory. The psychology is rooted in cerebral hemispheres. Genuine emotions originate from the more primitive subcortical areas of the brain, which project bilaterally to both sides. Faked emotions are a product of the motor cortex, which has more contralateral control, one side of the brain controlling the opposite side of the face. This can lead to that telltale asymmetry. Have you ever met someone whose smile felt off, like it was painted on? You were likely picking up on this very phenomenon. It's the brain's uncanny ability to recognize when a social signal is counterfeit. The third micro-expression is all in the eyes. Specifically, a sudden, dramatic change in a person's blink rate. Under normal, relaxed circumstances, most people blink around 15 to 20 times per minute. It's an automatic function you don't even think about. But when you put someone under stress, the kind of stress that comes from fabricating a story on the spot, that rate can change drastically. You're looking for a sudden flutter, an increase to 50, 60, or even more blinks per minute, right after a critical question is asked. This isn't just a sign of being tired or having dry eyes, it's a physiological response to a spike in cognitive load and stress. The brain is working overtime. It's trying to suppress the truth, construct the lie, monitor your reaction, and remember the details of its own fabrication. That is an immense amount of mental work. Think of it like a computer processor. When you run a demanding program, the fan kicks into high gear to cool it down. Rapid blinking is like the brain's cooling fan spinning out of control. Let me give you a cautionary tale about this one, which also teaches a vital lesson. I was working a corporate embezzlement case, interviewing an accountant named Margaret. She was a nervous wreck from the moment she sat down. Her hands were trembling, and her eyes were blinking like a strobe light. A rookie would have jumped on that. She's guilty, they'd think, but I had to establish her baseline first. I spent 20 minutes talking to her about her weekend, her cat, the weather, anything but the case. And her blink rate was consistently high the entire time. It turned out Margaret had a massive caffeine addiction and was perpetually on edge. Her normal state was high anxiety. The blinking meant nothing. It was just noise. However, later I interviewed her colleague. He was cool as a cucumber while we talked about his job duties. But when I asked, "Did you authorize the wire transfer on Friday the 13th?" His eyes started fluttering uncontrollably for about 10 seconds. Then he calmly said no. His blink rate went from normal to frantic and back to normal. That was the signal. It was the deviation from his baseline. You can practice this with friends, gently of course. Ask a neutral question like, "What did you have for lunch?" and observe their eyes. Then ask a slightly more sensitive but harmless one like, "What's the most embarrassing thing that happened to you in high school?" And watch for a change. Remember, the key isn't the blinking itself, but the change in the rate of blinking in direct response to your question. It's a powerful clue, but like all clues, it needs context. This brings us to the single most important principle of this entire business, the framework that separates the professionals from the amateurs. It's a concept the FBI and other agencies drill into their trainees. Cluster analysis. Relying on a single tell is a fool's errand. A person might press their lips because they have dry skin. They might have an asymmetrical smile because of a past dental surgery. They might blink rapidly because they're anxious about being questioned. Any one sign in isolation is meaningless. It's just data without context. But when you see 2, 3, or even 4 of these signals occurring in a rapid-fire cluster in direct response to a specific stimulus or question, that's when you have something. That's when you know you need to dig deeper. A cluster is a story the body is telling, even when the mouth is telling a different one. Think of it like being a detective at a crime scene. If you find a single footprint in the mud, what does it tell you? Not much. Someone could have walked through hours ago. But what if you find that footprint next to a discarded glove, next to a dropped wallet containing a fake ID? Now, you don't just have random objects, you have a lead. You have a pattern. It's the same with body language. Imagine you ask your neighbor, "Did you happen to see who dented my car?" And in the space of 3 seconds, he presses his lips together, gives you a quick lopsided smile, and his blink rate doubles. That is a cluster. That is significant. One of those tells alone. You ignore it. All 3 together. You don't accuse him, but you might ask a follow-up question like, "Were you parking your car around that time?" The goal of spotting clusters isn't to yell, "Aha! Gotcha!" It's to identify areas of sensitivity, topics where the person's internal stress levels are spiking. It guides your inquiry. It tells you where the truth might be buried. It's about being an astute observer of human nature, not a human lie detector. Have you ever had a conversation where everything seemed fine, but you walked away with a strange feeling of unease? You were likely subconsciously picking up on a cluster of incongruent signals. Your conscious mind missed it, but your animal brain knew something was off. The goal now is to teach your conscious mind what to look for. Now I want to give you a more advanced and subtle concept, something we used in longer interrogations when the suspect was well practiced and disciplined. I call it emotional residue. A significant lie doesn't just exist for the moment it's told. It leaves a trace. Like walking through a muddy field, you might wipe your boots clean, but there's still dirt caked in the treads. After a person tells a high-stakes lie, their body doesn't just instantly snap back to its baseline state of calm. The stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, are still coursing through their system. Their heart rate is still elevated. Their breathing might still be shallow. This lingering physiological arousal is the emotional residue, and it can last for a minute or more after the lie is spoken. Spotting this requires patience. It requires you to be comfortable with silence. I was once interviewing a suspect in a major theft case. He was a corporate executive, polished and confident. He answered every question with a calm, steady voice and perfect eye contact. He showed no obvious tells when he delivered his denial. He was good, but I had a hunch. After he gave his big, final, I had absolutely nothing to do with it. I didn't say a word. I just sat there, looking at my notepad, for a full 60 seconds. The silence in the room became heavy, and in that silence, he fell apart. He couldn't get comfortable. He shifted in his chair 3 times. He picked a piece of lint off his sleeve. He cleared his throat twice. He adjusted his tie. His body was still vibrating with the stress of the lie he had just told. He had delivered the line perfectly, but he couldn't handle the aftermath. The performance was over, and the residue was leaking out everywhere. He was showing what we call pacifying behaviors, self-soothing gestures the body does unconsciously to burn off nervous energy. He essentially confessed to me without saying another word. You can observe this in real life. After someone gives you an answer that feels a little too quick or rehearsed, just pause. Hold eye contact and nod thoughtfully for a few seconds longer than is comfortable. Don't say anything. Watch what they do in that silence. Do they stay calm, or do they immediately try to fill the void with more talk, or do they begin to fidget? The moments after the answer can often be more revealing than the answer itself. It's a test of their composure. A truthful person is comfortable with the silence. A liar often finds it unbearable. Now we enter the danger zone. This is where good intentions can go horribly wrong. Understanding these principles is one thing, applying them ethically and effectively is another entirely. The biggest pitfall I've seen in young detectives and in everyday people is confirmation bias. That's the tendency to look for evidence that confirms what you already believe. If you suspect your mechanic is ripping you off, you'll be hyper-focused on every little twitch and interpret it as proof of deception, even if it's just an innocent mannerism. You'll see what you want to see. This is a trap. You must approach every interaction as a neutral observer collecting data, not as a prosecutor looking for guilt. Your job is not to prove a lie. Your job is to find the truth, and sometimes the truth is that the person is just nervous, not deceptive. Remember Margaret the accountant. If I had been driven by confirmation bias, I would have ruined an innocent woman's career. The second major mistake is forgetting context. Culture, stress, and environment matter immensely. Someone from a culture where direct eye contact is considered rude might avoid your gaze out of respect, not deception. A person who is under immense external stress, worried about a sick family member, for example, will exhibit all the classic signs of anxiety that can be mistaken for lying. You must ask yourself, is this behavior a response to my question, or is it a response to the overall situation? Always consider the context. This is why I stress establishing a baseline. Without knowing what's normal for a person, you have no way of accurately interpreting what's abnormal. The final and most crucial point is this. Your knowledge is a tool for inquiry, not accusation. Never, and I mean never, confront someone by saying, "I saw you compress your lips. You're lying to me." That's aggressive, arrogant, and it will shut down any chance of getting to the truth. It turns you into an antagonist. Instead, you use the signals as a cue to be more curious. When you see a cluster of tells, you simply ask more questions about that specific topic. You get gentler. You get more inquisitive. You might say, "It seems like that topic makes you uncomfortable. Is there more to it?" Use these tools to open doors, not to slam them shut. The goal is insight, not a gotcha moment. Can you think of a time when you jumped to a conclusion about someone, only to find out later that the situation was more complex than you realized? This is the humility you must bring to every observation. So, we've covered the involuntary tells that leak out in a fraction of a second, the lip compression, the asymmetrical expressions, the sudden change in blink rate. We've talked about the myth of eye contact, the critical importance of looking for clusters, and the subtle art of spotting emotional residue. And most importantly, we've discussed the ethical responsibility that comes with this knowledge. This isn't about turning you into a walking lie detector to weaponize in your daily life. It's about giving you a lens of clarity. It's about empowering you to protect yourself, to understand the people around you on a deeper level, and to know when a situation requires a few more questions. The body keeps the score, and it rarely lies. The voice, however, has its own set of tells. The pitch, pace, and tone of someone's words can betray them just as easily as a facial twitch. These are the verbal and paralinguistic cues that, when combined with body language, give you a much fuller picture of the truth. Here's my challenge to you. For the next week, don't try to catch anyone. Just observe. When you're watching the news, talking with a cashier, or chatting with family, pay attention to these signals. Notice the little things. See if you can spot a lopsided smile on a politician or a lip compression when a friend talks about a stressful day at work. Just gather the data without judgment. See what patterns emerge. Share your most interesting observations in the comments below. I'd be fascinated to read what you discover. And this is a skill, and like any skill, it requires practice. Be patient with yourself. You are learning to read the most complex language in the world, the language of unspoken human truth. Use this knowledge wisely, use it with compassion, and use it to navigate your world with a little more confidence and a lot less fear. In our next episode, we'll dive deep into those vocal patterns I mentioned, how to spot deception just by listening to the way someone speaks. It's a whole other layer of the puzzle, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Stay sharp and stay safe.